Let's just remember that it is Kansas City. Kansas is literally in the name.
Yeah.
That's okay. We don't have to get into all that right
Yeah, we digress.
So let's talk about storytelling. Samantha, good morning. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about this. Park Hill is doing such a phenomenal job in so many ways, including student voice, which we did a video on. So if you want to learn more about student voice, just some of the tips and tricks that they're leveraging here, some award-winning tips and tricks they're leveraging here, be sure to check out on Peachjar Extra Credit the video Samantha and I did on what is that?
Student voice.
On student voice. Yes, check that one out. It's going to be awesome. And in this episode of Peachjar Extra Credit, I'm really excited to talk to you a little bit about more storytelling and kind of in depth some of the things that you're doing, which is great. I know you're super busy, so thank you so much for taking the time to do this with me this morning. Let's just start out with a little bit about yourself, your role here, what district we're at. Give me a little background on the district itself, if you would.
Yeah, well, welcome to Kansas City, Missouri. We're on
Thank
the
you.
Missouri side. This is Park Hill School District. We have about 12,000 students, about 2,000 staff, and we've got 20 buildings. We're building our 11th elementary, so soon to be 21 schools.
Awesome.
We're super grateful. Our comms team, our communications department, is a 6-person department. Wow. And so we're spoiled. We know that, but we work hard and we churn out a lot of engagement and stuff. And one of our biggest things is storytelling. It's really important to us, and so I'm super stoked to talk about it today.
Yeah, there's a lot there, and that's why I'm here specifically with you and y'all. The work that you're doing here is really incredible. You're doing really engaging, amazing content, some of it award-winning content, which is awesome. You said something about Missouri side. You know, for those of you that don't know, there is a Kansas City, Kansas and a Kansas City, Missouri, and you don't screw it up.
You do not screw it up.
So if you didn't know that, make sure you know which side of the line you're on before you say where you're at, because you don't want to do that one wrong, because you'll get corrected.
Yes, you will. And don't get me wrong, there are many great things in the state of Kansas. We just happen to take pride in the fact that we are in the state of Missouri.
And as a Kansas native, born and raised in Kansas, let's just remember that it is Kansas City. Kansas is literally in the name.
Yeah.
That's okay. We don't have to get into all that right now.
Yeah, we digress.
So let's talk about storytelling. And this one is going to be a little bit of probably a road trip. I think we're a little bit of a bird walk here on a lot of different subjects. But just as it relates to like maybe your strategic plan or your communications plan that you all have laid out here, can you talk to me, just kind of give me an overview of storytelling and how it's used here in Park Hill and what the significance is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great lead in. I think a huge part of our strategic plan is building successful futures for all of our students, regardless of their background, and making sure that they're college and career ready when they leave us. And so a big part of how we show the community that our students are growing and they're going to be ready for life after high school and that we're making school successful for them is through storytelling.
Yeah.
And so what does that look like? And what are the many ways that we can do that? And so that's kind of something that we are always like churning in our comms department of how can we showcase and implement like those goals and show how we're utilizing our strategic plan on the daily through stories from the lens of our students and our staff.
Yeah. And this, I'm going to ask you a question, and if you get kind of stumped by this, I have a couple of things that I know that you all are doing here that I think are really incredible, but how are you able to leverage like the student voice in the stories that you are telling?
There is a lot of autonomy.
Okay.
I feel like that we, through the trust and partnership of our superintendent and the cabinet, and the importance of having a communications department and kind of letting us fly with ideas that we may have.
That's awesome.
And so whether that's like a student vlog that we kind of talked about in one of our other podcasts that we did, of kind of letting them storytell and take us through their day at their building and storytelling it that way.
Oh, cool.
Whether it's through like a school-wide initiative, a big like spotlight type piece that we do that, we try, it's generally a little longer, 2 to 4 minutes, but how do we storytell like a building and like what that specific school is maybe focusing on that year? Or is it, is the leverage piece like something that we hear on the street about some really, really cool thing that a single teacher is doing in a building? And how do we highlight that? So
let me ask you another question then. What makes a good, in your experience, what makes a good story? What is maybe an element or two that you have found gets more engagement, or just has a deeper reach, or really it touches people in a different way? What is it that makes a good story? When you think back at some of your posts and things, and analytics that you're looking at that really get engagement.
It's funny. I almost want to say that like simpler is better.
Yes.
I have found that some of our best stories have been maybe like a single student and a single teacher.
Yeah.
And we've got 12,000 kids, but that single piece on what like the collaboration or that relationship or what it's about is telling more about what we are doing and what our teachers are doing for our kids than trying to do 6 different interviews or get video of 5 different math classes.
Yeah.
It's like a single story almost tends to do better.
Yeah.
One of the things that we do every month, so our previous superintendent started this and our current one is continuing it. And it's actually my favorite thing that we do every month. It's called our Park House Star Award. So it's a staff award. And so our cabinet chooses 3 staff members. So there's a pre-K elementary staff member, a secondary staff member, and then a support staff member. And then my colleague Paul and I get to go do a video piece on that. And so it is always just that teacher. And then we have them pick one student. It could be a current student. It could be a former student. And we get video of them throughout the day. The video is extensive in class and what they're doing. But those are more popular than any other piece that we do.
Yeah.
And it is profiling one teacher.
That's awesome.
And the great work that they're doing.
That's really good. And you had mentioned in there, I think something that's really important is that the less polished sometimes, the better. And I know you had a post. It was a principal, longstanding principal, just in the hallway doing something with the marching band, right? They were Sweet Caroline.
Swinging Sweet Caroline.
And, for context, it was just a cell phone video, right?
Yep.
Not a fancy camera.
Nope.
Audio probably was not great.
Nope.
No microphones.
Nope.
And how was the engagement on that?
Best one of the month. It was the best one that month.
Best one of the month. So if you're listening to this, like as far as storytelling goes, the way you're capturing the story isn't necessarily the most important thing. There are certain things you could do, and I'd love to talk about it a little bit more. You're very lucky to have a videographer on staff. I know, especially for my California peeps watching this video right now, who struggle in a department of one in sometimes districts that are very large, 30, 40, 60,000 students, 30, 40 schools. This might seem overwhelming, but that's a really great example of right place, right time, cell phone, principal's doing something cute in the hallway with the marching band. Easy to do that and put that back out to the world. It doesn't have to be a super polished product where you're coming back and doing heavy edits and trying to make it look the best that you can. So even if you're out there as a department of one, lean into what you can do because you can have a significant impact on just getting your program, services, mission, and values out there to the community at large in really simple ways. So if you don't have a videographer on staff, you're going to be all right. Let's talk about then real quick some of the tools. Let's keep it really simple. You can use a DSLR, really high-end camera, Nikon or Canon, just where you can take pictures and videos out there. Those are great. I've done a lot of work with those in my districts. But actually what I use most now and what I tend to favor these days is my cell phone.
Yeah.
So having a professional videographer on staff, probably Paul would cringe if he's watching this video right now. I don't know I haven't gotten to talk to him what his stance is on cell phone video. But I know most of my professional videographers are like, that never going to do what a DSLR does. But when you're out in the field, or just maybe, Kelly's out in the field, like, are you using a professional camera or are you using your cell phone most often?
So we do have a professional camera. So it's helpful because we have Paul and he knows how to use them. Okay. But we don't always. And I would say my hot takes on that are that I personally think cell phone video is very adequate.
Yeah.
I think the tips are horizontal versus vertical. And I think audio is super important. So even if you have a cell phone, invest in a simple microphone,
Yeah.
like something like a lav or something simple that you can plug into your phone, and then you just give to the person and have them put it on.
Yeah.
And then lighting is easy. Just don't stand them near a window, but don't have the window behind them.
Yeah.
So they look like a ghost or an aura. But find an area in a building or the school that has natural light. You don't have to invest in big old fancy lighting.
No.
Just if you're going into a classroom and they have some of their lights off, ask if you can turn all the lights on. I mean, like as simple as that. Like,
That's good.
I think the cell phone is completely adequate nowadays.
And you touched on something there that is critical, which is audio in certain contexts. If you're going to do like an interview with a student, or you're really trying to capture sound, the audio is paramount. And typically the golden rule is in video, audio is the principal concern, audio and lighting. You can get away with other problems, but audio and lighting are huge. A lapel mic is really a simple fix. And so actually, I'm just thinking right now, we'll link in the description of this video a resource that I put together that actually has links to all the equipment that I use. So the equipment I'm using right now, there's links to all that. And lapel mics can be really inexpensive. In fact, the ones that we're using right now just plug straight into my iPhone through a dongle that connects it to a 3.5 millimeter jack to a lightning port. Gets really good clean audio. And I want to say those lapel mics probably cost $20. And I've used them for years now. I also have another really cool setup on that document that's in the description of a wireless lapel mic setup. And that was also a really cheap setup. I think $30. And I've got school districts all over the country now using that setup because they get it from this document, and to very good success. And it's just a little power thing that plugs into the bottom of your phone, and then you turn the mics on and they automatically connect, and you just mic somebody up, and then they can get like 30 or 40 feet away, and you've got really good clean audio. So that's great for like, if you want to capture a lesson and you can mic the teacher at the front of the room, and then you're panning around the room as the students are kind of doing whatever that is they're engaging in. Maybe it's some science experiment and they're filling beakers with fluid or whatever, but you've got really good clean audio from the teacher at the front of the room. You're filming at the back of the room, and your setup is literally just 2 wireless mics and your phone. Very easy thing to use. I mean, we all know how to record just using our phones.
Yeah.
So
and that's an example of if you wanted a piece that you wanted to incorporate like some natural sound. Nat sound is the kind of technical term for it, and
Nice.
you hear the lesson going on.
Yeah.
If you're trying to actually do an interview, find a quiet space.
Yeah.
Like don't try and not set the person up in the hallway during passing period. You know, like find them during a planned time or a quiet corner office or something to do an actual interview. But I think it can equally be as compelling if you do kind of set it up with your example, where you do maybe have some of that like natural sound in the background, but the person with the microphone is easily heard, and the audio is a lot cleaner.
Yeah,
that way.
and that's what the mic will do for you. You'll get a lot cleaner audio, even if there is like students on the playground in the background or whatever.
Yeah.
And some of that noise is nice in the background.
Yeah.
It reminds you that you are at a school, and that microphone is going to help really clarify what the subject's voice. And I find when I mic up a student, like if they've won an award or they got their pottery piece or whatever, you get the microphone out and they're like, wow, this is real.
Yeah, and I think, when you talk about if you are doing an interview, there can be a lot of nerves, especially, and a cell phone might feel a little different, but like if you do have a camera or someone's setting up a camera,
It can be intimidating.
there can be a lot of nerves that go along with saying we want to interview you. And so, I think especially with students and younger students, playing off of the microphone piece can be really helpful too, and kind of calming them down.
That's so true. And that's one of the things I know you and I have talked about it, which is just making people feel comfortable, which is almost a really difficult one to teach people. You can teach somebody how to set up the lighting, or like watch out for the backlighting. Don't put somebody in front of a window. Turn them around so the light's coming in on their face. Microphones. Paying attention to backgrounds and what's behind your subject. But one of the things that's really hard to teach people is making somebody feel comfortable. I'm trying to think if I have any like tips on that. Do you have any tips on like just making somebody feel comfortable about being in the interview space and being on camera?
I think one thing that I thoroughly enjoy doing, I know it's helpful, but I thoroughly enjoy doing it is, again, I've got my colleague Paul who's kind of doing all the setup. And so I'm available to kind of have this conversation with them starting. And so you could still be doing that if you're a one-person shop while you're setting up, if you're able to multitask. It's just small talk. Like if it's a student, asking them how the year is going, what grade are they in? Do they have any siblings at this school? Like very easy, simple, like just
That's
get
awesome.
to know you type things. Same with the staff. How's the year going? Like, hey, I haven't met you yet. How long have you been in Park Hill? Or, maybe they're a veteran teacher, but we haven't talked to them. I'm so glad that we finally get to meet you. And then one thing that, Paul and I have been working together for almost 8 years. So if we can tell that the person is really nervous, Paul will kind of just tap me when like he's actually recording and set up.
Yeah.
And I'm able to kind of just naturally kind of flow into then what, so tell me about the math class that we were in today. Like that, I'm really glad that we got to come see that, or maybe the content is about math class, but you start with like, so what's your favorite class? And maybe they say something else, and then you kind of weave your way into like what the actual content is. A lot of times people won't even realize that like we've started.
And then when you're done, they always say, oh, that's it?
Yes.
Oh, we're done? Oh,
That's
that was
it.
so easy.
That's it.
Yeah.
Another thing that I would say is sometimes, especially with adults, they will want to have notes with them.
Yes. Oh.
They will have written something out, like either word for word or bullet points, or they, they want to have this big piece of
Read
paper.
it a couple of times,
That's
put
right.
it down.
And so what I'll say to them is, okay, set it down.
Yep.
And let's just talk like we're having a conversation, because that's what it is. Let's say I'm a parent and I'm here for conferences. Okay. And then after we're done, if you want to look down at your sheet and see if you've missed anything, we can go back.
Yeah.
And 99% of the time, they do
first
not look
take
at
is
it once.
perfect.
Yes,
Nope.
they don't look at their piece of paper once.
No. That's a really good tip. And you might, so it should be said, like, this is what makes a good story. So these are the tiny little details to pay attention to. And I also find that huge. First, like, let's just put it right out there, like, never script. Never let somebody just sit and read from the script. And I even take it a step further, and I don't let people use teleprompters if I can help it. Like, I'll tell them the same, like, hey, let's try this. I want you to read your notes. I'll give you the time and space. Like, do that. Read through this a couple of times. Let's put it down. Let's give it a shot. Then if we need to pull the teleprompter up, we'll do that. And never, like, they never need it. Because the chances of you putting somebody on camera and talking to them about content they're not familiar with are really low. We're not. It's not a gotcha situation. We're not trying to make somebody look silly. We're putting them on camera because this is their space. This is the topic that they know about. This is what they're teaching. They've got it, but the nerves get in the way, and they think they have to have that security blanket. I also find that, and you talked about this, and I'm sure I know you're doing it too, but you didn't overtly say it, which is just setting the stage and letting them know what to expect. I talked to them about, if I know there's going to be B-roll, one of the things I find with adults, if I tell them like, hey, you're only going to be on screen like 10 or 15 seconds, and then it's just going to be your voice, it's going to be B-roll, then they're like, oh, okay, they kind of relax a little bit, like they don't have to be on the whole time. So I find that one's good. Another thing too is it's great if you're setting up an interview and you get that feel where they're looking off camera, right? And so I always tell people like, it's just you and I talking. Don't look at the camera. Don't look directly in the lens. Just look at my eyes. Just straight here off the camera, and we're just gonna have a conversation. That tends to relax people too, because they don't feel like they're locked into a camera, which is nice. So just setting the stage also kind of helps with those nerves. And then, being able to flow into it organically. I've gotten that so many times too, like, oh, we're done? Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I think like the star pieces that I was talking about is a good example of when we're chatting with a student in that piece. I will often say, do you want your teacher in here? Will that make you feel comfortable? Or, would you like them to leave the room? And so it'll be a surprise, like what you say. Like you're really pumping them up to be like, this is really cool that like you got asked to do this, and like there's no pressure, like this is gonna be really fun, you know? And I think that sometimes helps too.
On the story thing, you just said something too about teacher being in the room. If you are interviewing multiple students, do not let the other students sit in the room while you're interviewing, because you're going to get the same answer from the next kid. What was your, I don't know, how was this cafeteria lunch day? The first kid's going to say, oh, it was great, we had pizza. If the other kids hear that, that's all you're going to get. From the next like 3 or 4 kids you interview. So make sure you're interviewing in separate spaces or keeping students, in a separate space so that you're getting unique individual answers if you are interviewing multiple students. I find that one has always been kind of tricky. They just repeat each other.
Yeah, I think that made me think of something when you asked that, like how was the cafeteria lunch or something.
Oh yeah.
This is something that I still struggle with, after I don't know, a decade of being in like the journalism / PR world, is those yes or no questions,
yes.
And so one thing, sometimes we will storyboard a piece and sometimes we won't. And so what I mean by storyboarding, if you're not familiar, is if we know more in depth about what the story, like with the message it's trying to convey or what we really want to capture, we will kind of plan out, like we want to make sure that we get this shot and this shot. We want to make sure that we get this question answered from, a staff member, from a student, et cetera, et cetera. And so when we go into that interview, I've kind of got that in the back of my mind. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we kind of go in and we don't know much about the story, and we're kind of just going to see how it unfolds. Yeah. And so when people say, like, I feel like I didn't answer what you needed me to answer, I feel like the interview wasn't great, I will keep asking questions until I feel like I know what I've got. Yes. And so I will even catch myself sometimes saying, and especially for kids, that's easy to be like, I will ask a question and it's like a yes or no answer. And so I'll be like, how are you doing in math now compared to when you first started? Fine. Great. Yeah. Yeah. Better. Tell me how, or like, can you share with me a little bit like what that looks like, or, how has your teacher helped you, or how do you know that they really care about you? Yep. I also find the golden nugget always is there anything else that you want to share that I haven't asked you? Yeah, absolutely. That was a staple. You will get your best sound bites. Yeah. Always finish with that. That's a good point. And I always ask them, I didn't mention this earlier, but have them restate the prompt too. So your voice isn't going to be on the video. So if you, I tell them a couple of things. One, I say, I might ask the same question in different ways. So especially for adults, because sometimes if you haven't put that disclaimer out there, they get annoyed. Like, I just answered that. And it goes back to what you just said, is like, but I didn't hear what I needed to hear. So let me rephrase that. And it's hard for the interviewer sometimes on the fly to reframe a question, but I do tell, especially my adults, that I might ask the same question or a similar question because you might have a different answer to the prompt. And then always restate the prompt. And I say, it's always the same thing I say, and this works really well for kids, and it's critical because you will say, how's math? And they'll say, okay. And then that's the video you've got. Your voice as the interviewer doesn't need to be on the film. You want the kid organically speaking about what that experience is. So I tell them, when I ask you a question, you have to restate the prompt. So the example is, if I say, what color is the sky? Don't just say blue. If I say, what color is the sky? I want you to repeat back, the sky is blue. Restate that prompt. And so that way your voice isn't in the interview and they know what to expect. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, we're both parents, and just validating their feelings too. Yeah. If there's a kid who's like, I'm really nervous, I am often like, it's okay to be nervous. That is totally okay. Yeah. It's totally okay to be nervous. I was wondering, are you okay to sit in this chair over here? And I'm going to talk you through how this microphone works. And like, you just keep talking. That's cool. I could maybe do some filibuster work in my next life, but small things like that can really, really change the whole like dynamic and atmosphere in the room. And goes back to what we're talking about, which is storytelling and what makes a great story. So we talked a little bit about audio. We talked a little bit about video. We talked a little bit about interview techniques and just making people comfortable on camera. All these are elements that go into making the story engaging and good and compelling. Let's talk about you mentioned storyboarding. We can talk about storyboarding just a little bit. I could share some of the things I was doing in my previous districts. But let's talk about some of the campaigns you've leveraged, because I know there's some really great campaigns. Like, tell me a little bit about the day in the life videos you're doing here in Park Hill, because those are really engaging, really great way to tell the story through the student voice. So talk to me about that campaign a little bit. Tell us what that is. Yeah, so this is kind of a new franchise. We are in our second year of trying this. We did it last year a handful of times, and we're trying to do it every month this year. And so what we do is we got a cell phone from our technology department. There's nothing on it. It's just the camera. And so we work with the administrators at a building. We pick a building. They help us identify a student. We kind of, we make sure we're representing the district well. So, what gender, what's their ethnicity, et cetera, what grade level. And then the student takes the community through a day in the life at their building. With this cell phone. Yep, with the cell phone, start to finish. And so the main rules are phone is horizontal. We want lots of selfies. We also want interview your teacher, or when you're sitting with your friends at lunch, tell us what are you guys talking about? What's going on? Are we talking Minecraft? Are we talking Pokemon? Are we talking about the football game on Friday night? What's going on? Are you in extracurriculars, or does school have an assembly that day? And what's your role? And so they introduce themselves, and then they just authentically show us what a day in the life looks like.
That's so cool. I know a couple stood out for me. Like, you had a senior. It was her first day of her last day of school.
So her first day of school.
First day of school.
Yeah. So she did that for us on the first day of school. Last year we had two seniors we have two high schools in Park Hill. So a senior from each high school documented commencement, graduation day. That's a great one. Of them putting on their caps and gowns, photos. A couple of them went to graduation parties.
What a great graduation, before commencement. Capstone video. That's amazing.
One of our girls at one of the high schools was Muslim, and so afterwards she took us to dinner and talked to us about the kind of authentic dishes that they do in their culture after a big celebration. They always do the same meal. Yeah. And so showed us all of that, showed us in the car with her family.
Wow.
We've had a student with special needs, so him and his aide took us through their whole day. We've had the one we just had recently. He's a 4th or 5th grader, and he's in mathletics, which is an extracurricular at our elementary schools. So they had their mathletics competition, and so he showed us that, and anything and everything for you, whether you have kids, maybe you have older kids, maybe you just live in the district but you don't have any kids in the district, to see what's going on at Chin Elementary, or what's going on at Plaza Middle School.
That's so cool. I mean, talk about, I don't know, I got goosebumps about a couple of those stories. I mean, talk about what makes a good story. And in that situation, all you have to do is edit the video, the footage that comes back. You're not even out there doing it.
Yeah.
No, it's even better.
Yeah.
So you're getting a really great, engaging, organic story. Because I'm telling you right now, I know those are great stories. All you have to do is put it together at the end. Some editing, some music, and then distribute it.
Yeah, we're ready to go.
That's awesome. So that's a really good one right there. Let's talk about maybe a little formal setup then, because I know that you have mapped out for the year particular programs at each one of your schools that you want to focus on. So then that's going to be a little bit different in that, in order to tell that story, I know you've probably met with staff, whatever, and really storyboarded out what that looks like. Can you walk me through that a little bit?
Yeah. So one example is quite a few of our elementary schools, part of their kind of building strategic plans is something called PBIS. So it's positive behaviors, interventions, and supports. Yep. So that's a big thing. There's a kind of a lot to encompass in that. And so when you've got something that's a little bit bigger, a bigger initiative, or a new curriculum, what we like to say is, can we focus on maybe 1 or 2 classrooms? So taking the elementary level, maybe a K1-2 class, and then maybe a 3-4-5 class. So we get differentiations in grades. And let's just focus our B-roll and video on 2 classrooms and highlight a teacher who's really well-spoken and maybe is on the PBIS team and they can speak to it. And then kids that are in those different grade levels. So we're not trying to cover 14 different classrooms and what PBIS looks at in every single room. But those teachers and those students can speak to the overall building of, here's what PBIS stands for. Again, I say, talk to me like I'm a parent and I've just come to conferences and I'm like, what's this PBIS thing that my daughter keeps talking about? Tell it to me in layman's terms, talk to me like we're having a conversation. And then the students tend to really add in the emotional part of here's what we're doing for it. Here's how it's helping me become a better student.
That's cool.
And so you can take a bigger concept like that, still make it a little bit more niche, but that's something where you would maybe tend to storyboard to say, okay, here's what we know the big concept is. And so how can we kind of pare it down to still cover the overall subject matter, but make it more attainable and not 12 minutes long, you know, make it something that people can understand. They can understand in a timely manner and get a good feel for what the building overall is doing and try to accomplish.
And you touched on something there too. What makes a good story is keep it short, simple, and concise, right? Yeah, like you said, not 12 minutes long. And, if you can keep it less than 5 minutes, really good. If you can keep it 3 minutes or less, really, really good. If you can keep it 1 minute or less, that's the best. Yeah. But it's really very difficult to tell the story, like you're just talking about, what a program or service or mission or values at a school. in 1 minute. So
Yeah.
you got to be real about what that's going to take to, what the expectations are. But you can take a longer format video, like if it's 3 or 4 or 5 minutes long, and pull vertical snippets out for like stories or reels, keep those 30 seconds, 45 seconds, and get little bits of the story out over time, which is another great way to leverage what you would have had just one video for and put out once. Now you can do that, but then over the course of the next like 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks, put out little snippets of that on shorts and stories and reels. And you've taken what you've done once now, and you've got a month's worth of content really easily.
Well, and think about something like if you're trying to, if you're putting a bond or a levy, or you're doing a campaign like that, like for an upcoming election, something that you do want to be filling people's, like our social media and content and making sure that people who are living under a rock are hearing it. And you want to be continually putting footage out. You don't want to be putting out the same verbatim interviews and videos because people won't watch them. So having those options to be able to shorten it or put it on different platforms can really be beneficial and important for bigger kind of community-wide campaigns too, like a bond or a levy. Yeah,
and you'll get a deeper reach. I don't know why this sparked a thought, but you bring up a great point in that. I did a video with Andrea Gribble, Social Schools for EDU is her website. And we did a video together, and she talked about doing the shorts and how much more engagement you're going to get. And sadly, you'll put all this effort into like longer format videos. Then when you pull shorts of those, you'll get a ton more engagement on the shorts than you will the longer format. That doesn't negate the relevancy of that longer format video. Still do that, still get it out there, because that's where you're really telling the deeper story than those little subsections that you might put out on stories and reels. Are going to tell the little nuances of the story and pull people in. And you can always point back to that bigger video, and it might get you more traction there as well. Doesn't always, but sometimes people are like, oh, I want to learn more about that. Keep your social media relevant. One thing I'll say that Andrea and also here at Peachjar that we found is that when you post things like flyers of like school and community events, it kind of bogs down the algorithm and it's not as engaging for your audience. And so you had mentioned like you want to reach people that aren't even parents, like voters, all that you don't maybe have a connection with because you don't have their email addresses and you can't email them directly. So if you're doing anything on social media that kind of messes up that algorithm, like let's say you post a back to school night flyer or a district state of the schools event on social media, and that gets very little traction, the algorithm goes, oh, well, you're not posting content that's relevant even to some of your followers, and less people are going to see it. So the next time you go post something, if it doesn't get immediate engagement interaction, it just kind of less and less people see it. So you want to make sure that you're using your communications tools in the most strategic way that you can, like keep flyers on like Peachjar and keep social media social. That way, when you're out there and you're really trying to reach that broader community, it's going to happen for you. And if you're posting engaging content like that and you're leaning into the stories and the reels, you're going to be hitting people that are not even parents in your district, which is great. You make a good point.
You do too. That sparked something else for me too. We just had a retiree coffee last week. So we invite all of our retirees twice a year to come have coffee and meet with our superintendent. And some of them were talking about how they maybe aren't as savvy on social media. I am not posting a stereotype here. I'm just saying some of it from the horse's mouth. Some of them are saying, they're not on social media all the time. And so they enjoy getting, like we have the Connection magazine, a magazine that we send out 4 times a year. You can do storytelling in that too, right? We've got written articles that we have students and staff members write for us. And there's always a little snippet from our superintendent in the cover. And so even being able to showcase stories like, or what we're doing through the lens of a written piece from a student or staff member is equally as important.
Yes.
So other ways that you don't even necessarily have to be storytelling through social media.
Yeah, that's awesome. And is your Connection magazine award-winning publication, by the way? Is that available digitally?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll link to that in the description. So if you want to check out what Samantha was just talking about, they do have a really beautiful magazine publication that they put out. It goes to every household within the district boundaries here. Really great place to tell stories, and it's filled with a lot of great stories. So if you just kind of want to see what a really great example of that is, check it out. We'll link it in the description below so you can identify that pretty easily. Just kind of talking about storyboarding a little bit more, because I get this question a lot from people that reach out to me and they want to know how I do voiceovers and stuff. One of the things I did in 2 of my previous districts that both districts are still doing today is I started doing a weekly video series. It's a 1-minute video on what happened that week throughout the district. And so I had a Google Doc, and it had all my schools listed on it. And then what I would do is I would look at like, what schools I hadn't been to that year, and I would reach out to the principal directly. And so every time I went and filmed anything at a school, I came back and immediately put the date and the subject of what I filmed at that school. So then at the end of the year, it was quite scary actually, because I saw the disparity between administrators and principals that were really, really good at connecting me at the district level with all the things happening on their campus. And then I would look and see like, oh my gosh, I went out there like 15 times. And then I would look down the list and be like, oh wow, I only went to that school twice. And so I would know I need to put more energy into making sure that I'm reaching out directly, because obviously that administrators, just focus on running the school and getting the day and making the best that they can for their students and staff there in their community. But that means I need to be knocking on the door saying, hey, let me in. What are you doing? And so each week I would identify schools that I needed to highlight the next week, and I'd reach out and I would just tell the principals, can you identify for me something I can come out and film at your school? I haven't been there in a month or 2 months.
Right.
I'd like to come out. Doesn't have to be anything crazy. It could be students building marshmallow catapults or shooting rockets off in the quad. It doesn't have to be some wild thing that no other school is doing. All we're trying to do is let people into the classroom to see the daily experience of the students. And I would go out each week and I would film at 3 or 4 schools, and it would take 10 or 15 seconds in each classroom to get what I needed, because it's a 1-minute video.
Yep.
So I can't be there for like 20 minutes filming. That's one tip I'll give you. If you are out on campus, stop filming when you think that you have enough. Like the instant that thought creeps into your head, like, I think I got what I need, stop, because you're going to fill your phone up with a bunch of other stuff you can't use, and you have to catalog it. Anyway, so I would go and I would film all that. I'd come back, and then I would put all the clips into like iMovie or CapCut or any other editing software you want to use, and I would organize the clips in the order I want, and then I would just go and write a really quick script, just a really quick script. And it kind of goes back to like see dogs, say dogs. So if you're talking about the rockets, make sure the rockets are on screen, and then we would blast that back out. And so kind of as far as how that relates back to storytelling, that was one of the things that we heard most from the community members, because it hit a lot of people that weren't necessarily parents. We blasted it out in every way we could, and to our key communicators list every week. So, we've all got that list of the city officials and the real estate agents and the business owners and the chamber contacts and all of that. Every week they would get a 1-minute video about the cool things that happened that week, and it was storyboarded out after the fact. So I didn't know the story going into it each week, right? Just go film whatever the schools were hosting, and then storyboard it later, which is cool.
Yeah. So we don't quite do it that niche, but our superintendent does something we call Mike's Minute, and we do that once a month.
Okay.
And so we will somewhat storyboard like overall, like these are the overarching themes or topics that we want you to talk about. And it's also a minute. So yeah, it's called Mike's Minute. Our superintendent's name is Mike. And so he always introduces himself. He does a version for our community that we put in our e-newsletter that we send to the community. And then he does a version for our staff.
That's awesome.
So similar topics, but he might like change it up a little bit if it's, internal or external. We sometimes do it here, but we sometimes do it out in the field.
Cool.
So if he's talking about like an addition to our high school, we'll go out and do it at the addition. And so he has a minute to talk about like what he's focusing on or what he's doing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And they're really engaging, and it's less than a minute. So
Yep.
you're going to get a lot more engagement on that than you would on something where if, your superintendent was spending 10 or 15 minutes to talk about the new addition. It's just too much.
Yep.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about the equipment. We talked a little bit about, good clean audio, good clean lighting. We talked about making people, as comfortable as you possibly can on camera. We talked about some of the subtle things that go into the work behind the scenes and the prep and the, maybe the storyboarding or the prep that you're putting into knowing what you want to get out of that story. Anything else that we haven't covered as far as storytelling would go?
We covered a lot.
We did. We covered a lot.
What'd you say at the beginning? We were going on a road trip here.
We are.
I love storytelling. It's my favorite thing to do.
Same.
And I really, it doesn't have to take a whole lot of effort. I think one of the biggest things is get out in your buildings and form those relationships. Once you start meeting staff and students, but a lot of times like the staff at the buildings, not necessarily the administrators, but the administrative assistants and the actual teachers who are teaching in those buildings, as you start making those relationships and just popping in to say hi and start asking like, what's going on? What's going on in your building? You guys got anything fun going on this month? Or you will find that stories will start coming to you.
They will.
Stories will start coming to you that you never even realized.
And I found they started to compete. Like, why'd you cover that? That's cool. Why didn't you do that at mine? Like,
Yeah.
right? So they started to compete a little bit. Yeah. One of the things you just said actually made me think of something else, which is forming the relationships. Students and staff love seeing themselves. So also what makes a good story is making sure you're highlighting those people. Great. They're going to help you reshare. So be sure that you ask them like, hey, when I put this out there, you're talking to a teacher or a principal or whatever, make sure that you're letting them know. I'll let you know when it goes live, or I'll let you know when I post or whatever. And I'd appreciate if you liked it, reshared it out with your family and friends. They're going to do that anyway. But that really helps drive a story out to a broader audience, because then they're sharing it with people that you're not even connected to, which is great. And then the other thing I found made really great, compelling stories, and this is a little bit more of a niche thing, but make sure that you're highlighting, and I know you all are doing this, but groups outside of just teachers and students. So one of the things I found incredibly impactful, and it was really funny when I started this project, but I hit up the maintenance and operation crews and the grounds crews one summer, a few years back at one of my districts. And I just hit up the director and I said, I would love to come out and highlight the work that your teams are doing over the summer to get school ready. And then, because I wanted a social media campaign over the summer, so my social media was still popping, still relevant. And I thought, well, let's talk about all the work that goes into making schools ready for the kids to come back. And then highlight the crews that are always overlooked. And at first I thought, I'm going to go out to these teams that are like their sleeves are rolled up, they're dirty, they're making it work, that I thought for sure they would just hate my presence, right? A camera while they're out there trimming bushes or trimming trees or scrubbing toilets or whatever it is, right? I thought for sure they were going to hate me. But it was so opposite. They were ecstatic. I mean, I had like the biggest, burliest like tree trimmers out there, like vying to be on camera. Like, whoa, come over here. I want to show you. And then they were joking around with you. No, okay, you don't need Paul on film. Come over here. I want to show you what I'm doing over here. And it was funny. It was like totally opposite of what I was expecting, because nobody had highlighted them before. So make sure, as far as your storytelling goes, you're also looking for those groups who might be overlooked. Your transportation drivers, your nutrition service workers, they never get a shout out, right? On social media. Your grounds, your maintenance and operations, they will love you for it. And then what I found was like, it goes so heavily toward building culture and developing brand ambassadors that might, you might have a nutrition services worker just coming in every day because it's a job, and they do what they do because they love the kids, but they're not terribly connected. And then the instant you go in there and start highlighting the importance of the work that they're doing, and they see themselves reflected on district social media, maybe your website, social media spaces, now you've got like a friend for life, a really good brand ambassador, and you've brought relevancy to the work that they're doing, which is cool.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great point you brought up. One summer we did that. We highlighted a mechanic, and it was talking about like keeping our buses in order throughout the summer. Well, unbeknownst to us, he was a Park Hill School District alum.
Oh, cool.
Like grew up here. And so that was a whole part of the story that we didn't even know.
That's awesome.
That was, authentically added in, of like growing up here, and he knew Park Hill was a great district and wanting to come back and work for the district that taught him so much. Gold. Yeah. Gold.
Solid gold.
Another thing that if you're watching this in the Midwest or an area where you get snow, we our colleague Paul came in early one day during a snowstorm and just got video. So no interviews, just video of all of those crews snow plowing.
Yes, yeah.
And that was also one of our most engaging posts of the entire year.
That's insane, right?
Just some video. He got up early, came in, just videoed a few different schools and just saying
Wasn't
thank
super
you.
Polished.
Nope.
And highlighted the work that went into getting everybody to school that day.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can kind of about wrap it up. The last question that I would have for you is, why is storytelling so important?
I think storytelling allows you to convey messages in a way that I don't want to say is always entertaining, but is worth watching. If you can highlight something that could be said at a board meeting in a story, it's going to hit closer to home.
Yeah.
And so in a business like a school district where you've got kids and you've got adults that are dedicating their lives to teaching students, if you can convey a message, whether it's a hard message or something as simple as like snow plowing, in a way that can reach people and like really be emotional, that it can literally make a difference in someone wanting to move here or someone wanting to be a part of this district, someone wanting to work for you, in how you treat your staff and how you're setting your students up for success. You can put something on a poster board. You can send something in an email.
Yeah.
You can look in the camera at a teleprompter and read bullet points. But if you can tell it through a story, and like I said earlier, even if that's through the story of one single student or one staff member, it can hit closer to home in a way that you can't beat.
Yeah.
You can't do it any other way.
Well said. Well said. Yeah. Builds culture. Yeah. And you touched on something there, like we all need recruitment efforts are a huge thing right now, students and staff. I know in my previous district, and maybe this person was just trying to like get in my good graces, but I know I was in an interview and somebody said, you know, one of the biggest reasons I applied here is because I was looking around your websites and your social media feeds and it just looks like a fun place to be.
Exactly.
That's huge. The power of storytelling.
It cannot be beat.
It cannot.
The power of storytelling is, I think, imperative.
Which goes back to, I'll just make a final plug for the importance and significant role the communications department plays in an overall district success. Because when you think about it, the communications office is in a really unique position that not a lot of other departments are in to really impact the bottom line in relation to the climate and culture of the district. You know, we get to drive the stories. Superintendent's office, of course, has a big piece in that, but that individual is focused on so many other facets of running a district. They certainly can't focus on telling the stories in a way that a professional team can. Sometimes that role falls to the superintendent's secretary. Sometimes it's someone else. But the value of the communications role cannot be overstated. So if you're a department of 1, a department of 6, I know teams that are departments of 50 or more, which blows my mind. Your role cannot be overstated in the power that you have to impact almost every facet of your community.
I think one thing we didn't even touch on is when it comes to bad news or crisis communications, that storytelling can also be vital in that realm as well. Because if you've ever dealt with any sort of crisis, you know that people are going to tell their own story.
Yes.
And if they don't hear it from you, or they don't hear it from you in what they think is a timely manner, pause for a second there, that they will come up with their own story. They will tell they will have their own narrative about bad news and crisis. And so I think storytelling is also imperative in that realm of communicating out like what happened, good, bad, or otherwise.
And what you're going to do about it, what action and what steps you're going to be taking.
Yeah. And I think we have to be able to tell that story as well. And it's obviously going to look different if it's like a crisis, but being able to tell that story from the district's, like internally from the district's lens is also very important. Yeah,
really important. And that can be done in a lot of different ways. One of the things I've been seeing a lot more recently are superintendents willing to get on camera and really get ahead of it and send personalized messages out to families in the community at large, which is great. I don't remember the district's name off the top of my head, but they had to cancel the first couple of days of school because of transportation issues. The superintendent just got on camera and blasted out a message to everyone saying, look, this is not what we want, but we need to really make sure that we have things lined up so that all kids can get to school safely and securely. It's going to take us a couple of days to work this out, my team's going to work through the entire weekend. We will be back on Monday for our first day of school. Mm-hmm. So it was just really powerful coming directly from the superintendent. But yes, in times of crisis, in times of emergency, storytelling becomes even more critical. I mean, we were talking about all the happy times.
Right.
But you're absolutely right, which is great because that does go, to a lot of the things we talked about with culture and retention and recruitment of students and staff and the community's buy-in for what your local schools are doing. But just as almost more important and critical are those times of crisis and emergency, because how you respond to that can build trust or it can erode trust. Storytelling becomes critical in that moment.
Yeah. So not to end on, crisis response,
downer.
but equally as important as all the good news.
Equally as important as all the good news. Yes. Well, thank you, Samantha. That's a good point. I'll try to take a deep breath, come back. I'm having some moments flood back into my memories of crises and emergencies over the years, right? It is a very difficult role. So for all of you out there that are watching this, that are in the role of communications, I know especially right now, it's just a really tricky space to be in. Just public education in general, and the work that we all do in the communications office. So huge shout out to everybody out there. Thank you for what you're doing. You have a significant impact on just on life, period, for everyone in your district and in your district boundaries and in your community. So keep up the good work. Keep your head up. It's awesome. Samantha, thank you so much for joining me this morning. This has been amazing. I've absolutely loved spending the time with you and talking through what's going on here at Park Hill and the work that your office is doing. It is really amazing. So be sure to check out their websites, their social media feeds. We'll have some links in the description to some of the cool resources that we mentioned today. Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming by, Matthew.
Oh, this is awesome. In Missouri.
In Missouri.
Don't screw that up. All right. Well, thank you very much. If you liked this, be sure to like, share, comment, follow for more. We've got a lot coming at you here on the channel for Peachjar Extra Credit. We've got some really great videos around almost every topic you can name. Samantha and I did another video on including student voice into your communications plan, and that was amazing. So be sure to check that out when it drops. So if you have any questions, either one of us would be happy to take your call, happy to return any emails. Get in the comments section if you have questions. We'll get in there too, answer anything that you might have. Again, thank you so much. That's all we got for now. Stay tuned.
See ya.